Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Sam Menzie, and we have a great show for you today. First topic we'll be going over is going to be the Mike Trout injury for the Los Angeles Angels and the effect that is going to have on the team. After that, we'll be going over the games of yesterday and just recapping all the action there. Then going over the new World Series odds that have been announced. Now, before we do all that, I would like to ask you to please like and follow the show. We do get a number of questions from viewers, so to ensure that your question does get read in the air, please use the link gsmcpodcast.net. It really does help the show, and it really does mean a lot, so thank you so much for that. And let's get into the show today. All right, as I talked about, the first segment is going to be what I think everyone knows is the most significant news that happened in baseball recently, and that it is Mike Trout and him having a torn meniscus, and he will be out for a significant period of time is how I'm wording it. So, Trout, this is something that unfortunately is not a huge surprise nowadays. We know of Mike Trout. We know how good he is. We know he is an all-time great. He's one of the greatest players to ever touch the baseball field. I think he was at one point the front runner for greatest baseball player of all time, but his career has progressed, and unfortunately it's gone down rather than up, and injuries have been, unfortunately, the main culprit of that. Now, first off with this, I want to say how disappointed I am for Mike Trout and how sad I am for him. He was having such a great season, was one of the league leaders in home runs, was one of the league leaders in MVP, was finally having that bounce-back season that we all expected him to. You know, the last few seasons weren't awful, but they also weren't exactly to the Mike Trout standard, if you know what I mean. So finally seeing Trout go back to being the Trout we all know of, that elite guy, that elite hitter, and now getting hurt with it is really disappointing and really unfortunate. So I first of all want to say again how saddened I am for Trout and how sad I am just for everyone that loves watching him. Again, he was finally having that great season for the first time in a few years, and now it is gone for a little bit. So now let's just go over the actual injury. So he tore his meniscus, which he is tearing a ligament in his knee apparently, and he is supposed to be out for a significant period of the year, but not the whole year. Now, I don't necessarily know if I believe that, to be perfectly honest. A meniscus is a very serious injury, and we've seen a lot of people be out for a significant time when it does happen. I mean, it usually is a 12-month recovery if you do look into the science of it and the facts of it. So I'm not exactly sure how Mike Trout, who is older and is now going to return rather quickly from that injury. Now, what I will say is there's been a lot of updates in sports science over the past few years, sports medicine. I mean, the biggest example I'd have is Joel Embiid of the Philadelphia 76ers. He recently had a torn meniscus and returned rather quickly. He did miss most of the season, but it wasn't as significant of a time period as you may expect in the past for a torn meniscus. So I think that's factoring into it as well, that the Angels may be confident in their doctors, may be confident in the recovery plan, and be confident how much Mike Trout does want to come back and how much he will attack his rehab. So that's possible. Again, there has been a lot of updates in sports science, sports medicine, just helping injuries in the past few years. So I could see that as a possibility, and I could see that as why they feel confident that Trout could come back soon. So that's possible. But the thing about Trout is it's not like he's young. He's not a 24-year-old, 25-year-old who's just getting his career started in his prime. No, he's 30 now. He's been a player for a long, long time. He has an extensive injury history, so it probably isn't going to take him a shorter time period than most people with this kind of injury, because he is older, because he does have that extensive injury history. So I think that's also something to factor in here, just looking at what is going to happen. So I am sad for Trout again, having such a great season, and now it's cut short because of this injury. I think the realistic possibility is that he is back by early September at the earliest, and the latest is, of course, he missed the season. So that is unfortunate. Just for the impact on his career now, that's another thing I did want to talk about. I mean, I don't think it's a real shocking statement to say when I was growing up, Mike Trout was looked at as one of the GOATs, a guy who, when he retired, would be in the running for greatest player of all time, or could even be the favorite. I'm 18, born in 2005, so growing up, seeing the mid-2010s Mike Trout, that was the guy. That was the guy you watched. You always wanted to see what he was doing. That's the guy you wanted to collect baseball cards of, because he was he was that guy. Like I'm saying, he was an elite player. He was the best player in baseball for a long, long time. He was going on track for be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I thought he was going to be the greatest player of all time when it was all said and done with how his career was going. And the thing about him was back then he didn't really have injuries. He might have had some like a regular player, but he didn't have any real significant ones. And he won 3 MVPs. Maybe should have won 1 or 2 more. Didn't get rewarded that because of voter fatigue. So you saw how great he was, and we are like, this guy's invincible. What's going to happen to him? Nothing. He's Mike Trout, right? He's going to be one of the greatest players of all time. But instead, now as he's gotten older, his career has decreased a lot. It hasn't gone exactly as planned, and it hasn't really gone to where people look at him the same anymore. So it's just unfortunate because of how his career started. Again, it started as this guy's the greatest player of all time. He's insane. He was basically not, I don't say this lightly, but he basically was the LeBron of baseball in his prime. Now, yes, the problem with Trout was he never won in the playoffs, but I think any baseball fan knows that was not his fault. The Angels organization has been incompetent for a long, long time, and it's not his problem that this team was filled around him with guys who got awful contracts, guys who never performed, just guys who shouldn't have been on a major league roster. Yes, he got Shohei Ohtani. Yes, he got a washed-up Albert Pujols. He got some other okay pitchers, but there was never anything that was so significant where it would improve the team a lot. The Angels and Artie Moreno never really knew the tactic of, okay, instead of spending all this money on one player who's really good, spend it on 4 or 5 good players that are okay, that are going to impact the team a lot more. Instead of spending $30 to $40 million a year on Anthony Rendon, who would get hurt and never really play for the Angels, you could have spent that maybe on 3 quality starting pitchers, or 2 quality outfielders, or relievers or something. The Angels never understood that tactic of, spending the most money on one player doesn't make any sense. And I think that's really where the failures in his career came from. And unfortunately, it is what a lot of people are going to look at when Mike Trout is done. When Mike Trout retires in 5 to 10 years, people are going to look at his career like, okay, he started off as one of the greatest players of all time, was on that track, but he never made the playoffs. He didn't win a playoff game. As of right now, he didn't win a playoff game. It's very possible he does in the future, but I'm not exactly sure about that. And, that he also got hurt, and he didn't really fulfill his full potential. So that's unfortunate that Trout's career is going to be looked at that way. There is still a possibility that he gets rid of that, and that he still can be a great player in the future and continue his reign of dominance that he had once before. But we'll have to see. And another thing is with him, does he stay his whole career with the Angels? That's another thing. I keep talking about how incompetent the organization is, how they have no idea what they're doing. So if you're Trout, at some point you get frustrated and say, you know what, I've tried my hardest, I've been loyal enough, I've said I wanted to stay here multiple times when I could have requested a trade when we guys have been rebuilding, but it's time for me to go, and I want to get out. Now, I think that's a very big possibility in the future. I think that a lot of people don't really think about that, but I do think Trout at some point may just get frustrated and say, you know what, living in LA, having my family set in one place, it's just not worth it anymore. I want to go somewhere else. I want to start over. I want to be with a new team. I want to win a World Series. Trout's a very loyal guy. From everything we've heard, he does want to spend his entire career with the same team. That means something to him, which is honorable, but at the same time, he has to look out for his best interest and his legacy. Legacy in baseball isn't really as important as maybe in basketball or football, but it's still important. And I think Trout may just wake up one day and say, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to win. I don't think you guys can let me win. And he may just request a trade. We all know that if he's going to request a trade, he's only going to one place, and that place is the Philadelphia Phillies. Trout grew up a diehard Phillies fan. The Phillies love their stars. It would be an insane storyline. Phillies fans were convinced he was coming there after they signed Bryce Harper, that Harper was going to recruit Trout there. And Trout has a full no-trade clause as well, so could we see Trout to the Phillies in the future? I don't know. I think that it's definitely possible, and I think anyone saying it's not possible is a little bit delusional. But so that's definitely what I'm watching, and I definitely want to see how Trout's career is affected and his legacy is impacted. When I'm telling people in the future, when I'm 30 or 40, about Mike Trout, what are they going to say? Are they going to say, oh, yeah, I know how good he was, or, oh, he was good for a few seasons, but he was injured and never lived up to his potential, and he never won, so why do you care? I think that's going to be something really interesting to follow and just interesting about his career. So that's something I am extremely just fascinated to watch as the future does go on. So the impact on the Angels here, I think, is pretty astronomical. I mean, it's Mike Trout, for crying out loud. He's had 10 home runs this year. He's one of the leaders in AL MVP. He's one of the greatest players of all time. I don't think you can really overestimate how big of a loss this is for the Angels. He's one of their better players. The Angels do have some good hitters in that core. I mean, Logan O'Hoppe, Mickey Moniak, Nolan Schnuel, Zach Neto. So you do have a lot of guys, but no one's Mike Trout. You just lost Anthony Rendon as well, which is a big part of your hitting core. So I don't think you can, again, overestimate how big of a loss this is for the Angels. Again, it's Mike Trout. We all know who he is. We all know how good he is. I don't think, saying anything like that, saying that, the Angels might be done now is an overstatement. So the Angels weren't that good anyways, but I thought they had a lot going for them. I thought that there was a lot of good pieces here that they didn't really have in the past. Again, I'm talking about it. Their hitting core: Logan O'Hoppe, Zach Neto, Nolan Schnuel, Mickey Moniak, some other prospects coming up, like Nelson Rada is someone I think of immediately. So the Angels, for once in a little while, do have somewhat of a young core. They have some pieces, but I don't think they were ever going to compete this year, and I think losing Trout now just really solidifies that. The thing I'm interested to see is what draft pick do the Angels get? Because the problem with the Angels has been for the last few years, they haven't been bad enough to get a real top draft pick because they've had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Well, Ohtani's gone and Trout's hurt now. And also Rendon, who at healthy is still a good player, is out as well. So it's going to be interesting. Can they get a good draft pick, maybe even a franchise-changing guy to pair with Trout and help that young core? So this could be a blessing in disguise, quote unquote, for the Angels. I don't know if that's really something Angels fans want to look at, but they've kind of been stuck in this mediocrity for a little while. I compare them to the Chicago Bulls of basketball or the New York Islanders of hockey, but I think they were a little bit worse than those two teams, because those two teams made the playoffs while the Angels didn't. But again, they were just stuck in mediocrity, didn't really have a full plan. So it's going to be interesting to watch now with Trout hurt. Do they just go fully tank? Do they trade everyone? Do they try to get a good draft pick? I mean, they have some good trading pieces. You have Tyler Anderson, who's been a quality starting pitcher this year. Brendan Drury, who's a good player in an expiring contract. Some relievers as well, like Carlos Estevez, Adam Simber, Matt Moore. So it's going to be interesting to watch the Angels now without Trout, what their plan is and what does go on. So, it's very unfortunate for Trout to be hurt and for him to be out for the Angels. I don't want to say anything positive about that. There are some at least positives for the Angels and their team and their organization, that they may have to determine a full lane of this is what we're going now. This is our plan and this is our future. And that is possible, and we'll have to see. But again, really unfortunate for Trout. Really do feel bad for him. He was having a great season for the first time in a little bit. Was like consistent, was looking healthy, and just gets all shot down by this torn meniscus in his knee. So really unfortunate, and I really do feel for the guy. So that was our first segment here. Talking about the Mike Trout injury for the Los Angeles Angels. We'll be going to our second segment, which is going to be talking about the American League games of yesterday and just talking about all that action. I did want to switch it up and put these segments at 2 and 3 and open up with a different story. I felt like Mike Trout was the more significant one and the one to talk about. So, going to our second segment, and we'll see after that. We'll go to the break, and we'll see after that. So thanks, and bye.